They called it sin with a chandelier. But the wildest Hollywood house parties were far more than rumor. What really went on behind those locked doors when the stars let their masks slip and the rules vanished? Which secrets were too explosive even for the tabloids? Tonight, we'll step inside the mansions where reputations were lost and legends were born. Some stories never made the headlines, but you might just hear what was never meant to leave those walls. 1. Jane Mansfield's Hollywood Hills mansion parties. If the hills could talk, Jane Mansfield's mansion would scream. No address in Hollywood was whispered about more. Her pink palace high above Sunset Boulevard was a shrine to every taboo, every thrill the town's censors tried to smother. Jane, the ultimate blonde bombshell, was Hollywood's high priestess of excess. She threw open her doors to anyone with star power or the nerve to keep up. The pool, always illuminated in soft neon, reflected more than just moonlight. It was said to reflect every secret hope and unspoken dare in the industry. At Mansfield's parties, nothing was left at the gate. Stories swirled of orgies beside the heart-shaped pool, with guests as bold as the Kennedys and as wild as rock musicians. Jane delighted in spectacle. Some nights, it meant impromptu burlesque. Others, midnight skinny dipping as paparazzi circled outside, hoping for one compromising shot. It wasn't just about sex. It was about power, freedom, and the thrill of knowing that for a few hours, the rules didn't apply. Rumors insisted she sometimes filmed these escapades, tucking the reels away in hidden drawers, more powerful than blackmail, more dangerous than any press leak. Jane's lovers were the stuff of presidential legend. Her affairs with both John and Robert Kennedy were an open secret. Yet even they were only guests in her world, where her smile was both invitation and dare. And yet, what happened at Jane's house stayed there, unless it made the papers, which it sometimes did. The legacy of her parties? A place where good taste went to die, but where you might just come alive, if only for one wild, unforgettable night. 2. The Garden of Allah, Hollywood's sinful sanctuary. It wasn't a house, but for 3 decades, the Garden of Allah on Sunset Boulevard was home to the most lawless, untamed house parties Los Angeles would ever see. Created by silent film siren Alla Nazimova, it started as her own estate before morphing into a labyrinth of bungalows, each with its own secrets. The Garden became the only place in the 1930s and 1940s Hollywood where you could truly be yourself, if yourself was thirsty, ambitious, or hiding from the press. It was the ultimate safe space for queer actors and forbidden affairs. Marlene Dietrich, Greta Garbo, Errol Flynn, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and Orson Welles passed through its vine-shaded courtyards. They came to shed their public personas, lose themselves in cocktails stronger than most marriages, and chase pleasures that would ruin them in the gossip columns. Legends say Nazimova herself coined the term sewing circle for the hidden lesbian and bisexual coterie who found refuge in her gardens. If the night had a rhythm, it was jazz pulsing from behind closed doors, laughter echoing through the halls, the hush of velvet curtains drawn tight as new alliances and rivalries took root. The wildest stories. Tommy Dorsey, the band leader, once parading 2 naked women from his bedroom, their bodies shaved and dyed to spell out his initials. F. Scott Fitzgerald smashed a champagne glass in a drunken spat with Zelda, and beneath every glittering chandelier, deals, betrayals, and secrets were traded in whispers. In the Garden, the only rule was there were no rules. By morning, the lobby was a graveyard for lost illusions and broken glasses. Many careers were made and destroyed at the Garden's parties, but everyone left with a story they could never tell in daylight. 3. Cal Neva Lodge, Sinatra's mobbed-up retreat. High above Lake Tahoe, where California and Nevada meet in a tangle of pine and mist, the Cal Neva Lodge became the secret stage for Hollywood's most decadent, dangerous weekends. Frank Sinatra didn't just own the place, he ruled it, with the Rat Pack, the mob, and Hollywood's royalty dancing to his tune. Here, there were no prying cameras, no Hays Code morality, just endless nights and risks as big as the bets laid on the tables. Sinatra's parties were infamous for drawing a guest list where Marilyn Monroe might share a drink with Sam Giancana, the notorious mobster. Dean Martin crooned as piles of chips changed hands, and everyone knew the real business was being done upstairs, behind locked doors. Whispers of drug deals, affairs, and even political favors circled the casino floor like cigarette smoke. There was a sense of immunity at Cal Neva, a belief that what happened in those shadowed halls could never touch you back in Los Angeles. But sometimes, the stakes were higher than even Sinatra bargained for. Marilyn Monroe's final days saw her at Cal Neva, and some say it's where she found herself caught between Hollywood, the Kennedys, and the mob, a triangle that may have cost her everything. Sinatra's gaming license was eventually revoked, and the lodge's reputation became as notorious as its guest list. But for a few years, it was the last place you could party like a movie star, make a deal with a mobster, and fall in love, or fall from grace, all in one dizzy, dangerous night. Fourth, Errol Flynn's Mulholland Estate revelries. When the moon rose over Mulholland Drive, Errol Flynn's mansion transformed into Hollywood's most notorious den of mischief. Nicknamed Mulholland Farm, Flynn's Spanish-style home became the stuff of legend, where stars and starlets alike surrendered to their wildest impulses, and the city's rules were checked at the door. Hidden alcoves, secret passageways, and even cages for his exotic pets set the stage for an environment as unpredictable as its owner. Every week brought a new gathering. Flynn, with his devilish grin and roguish charm, presided over nights of bottomless champagne, thunderous jazz, and storytelling that blurred the line between truth and tall tale. His guest list read like a Hollywood roll call: Clark Gable, Olivia de Havilland, David Niven, and a rotating cast of up-and-comers desperate to belong. But the real action happened out of sight: daring escapades in the garden, whispered trysts behind thick curtains, and, occasionally, midnight rides on Flynn's horses. Rumors swirled that Flynn's home was where the industry's taboos fell away. Some guests arrived already in disguise, hoping to disappear into the crowd. Others let the night consume them, dancing on tables or skinny dipping in the moonlit pool. At Flynn's parties, what you did, and with whom, was never to be repeated outside those walls. His house became a confessional, a sanctuary, and a trap all at once, its secrets protected by loyalty, blackmail, or simple fear. Flynn himself courted scandal at every turn, even as he charmed the press with stories of harmless fun. But those who attended knew the truth. Behind the laughter, these nights could make or break a career, a romance, or a life. By dawn, all that remained were empty bottles, cigarette butts, and the sense that, for a few stolen hours, everyone had lived without consequence until Hollywood called them back to reality. 5. MGM's 1937 Salesman's Bash, Ambassador Hotel. Not every wild party ended with a hangover and a laugh. Some shattered the illusion of Hollywood glamour forever. In 1937, MGM threw a grand celebration at the iconic Ambassador Hotel, a lavish spectacle to honor the studio's top salesman with all the trappings of power and excess. Marching bands, a private train, celebrity entertainment, and an open bar set the stage for what was supposed to be a triumph. Instead, it became the scene of one of Hollywood's darkest scandals. The guest list included the studio's most powerful men, flanked by 120 young women, dancers and movie extras, including Patricia Douglas, who believed she'd been hired for an on-location shoot. What awaited them was something far different. As the ceremony faded and the liquor flowed, the night turned predatory. Douglas was allegedly targeted by a drunken salesman, forced to drink, and then assaulted, a violation both personal and public, carried out in the very heart of Hollywood's elite. Douglas refused to be silent. She spoke out, describing in painful detail what had happened, and sought justice in a world built on secrets. But MGM was a fortress, and its fixers were legendary for making problems disappear. Evidence vanished, witnesses recanted, and the studio's reputation, its profits, and power remained intact. Douglas was left isolated, branded a troublemaker, her story all but erased from the official record. Decades later, the truth finally surfaced. The bash was no harmless party, but a turning point, exposing how quickly Hollywood could turn on its own to protect its image. The MGM Salesman's Party remains a chilling reminder that behind the glitz and laughter, real lives were shattered, while the champagne glasses, kept clinking in the ballroom above. 6. Marion Davies's Santa Monica Beach House bashes. To party at Marion Davies' legendary Santa Monica Beach House was to step straight into a fantasy, one with a razor's edge. Perched on the Pacific's golden shore, the sprawling mansion was the West Coast's answer to Gatsby's Long Island. Its host, Marion Davies, a brilliant actress and longtime mistress of newspaper tycoon William Randolph Hearst, brought together Hollywood's elite and America's power brokers under one sun-soaked roof. Davies' soirees redefined excess. Imagine a moonlit pool glimmering beyond endless white sand, where stars like Charlie Chaplin, Greta Garbo, and Jean Harlow drifted from cocktail hour into midnight madness. Behind the Art Deco facades, champagne flowed by the case, jazz spilt from the ballroom, and secret rooms played host to games only the bravest dared join. Scandals, affairs, and whispered deals pulsed beneath the surface, sometimes quite literally, as with the secret tunnels that ran from the house to the beach, ensuring the privacy of both lovers and criminals. But it wasn't all glamour. One notorious night in 1924 saw Hearst, known for both his influence and his jealousy, allegedly pull a gun on Chaplin during a heated argument, an incident only barely contained by quick-thinking guests and hushed up by the tabloids Hearst controlled. On other nights, brawls broke out, glasses shattered, and egos clashed, sometimes drawing blood or breaking hearts. Yet the allure never faded. Davies' Beach House was where Hollywood's masks came off and real power was wielded, where you could gamble with fortunes, reputations, and sometimes your life. The parties were legendary, not just for their extravagance, but for the sheer sense of freedom and danger. If you were lucky enough to be invited, you remembered it for the rest of your days. If not, you'd only hear the rumors, never knowing just how wild things really got when the ocean breeze met the secrets of old Hollywood. 7. Roaring Twenties Blowout, Eddie Fisher and Debbie Reynolds. In 1955, when America's sweetheart Debbie Reynolds and her chart-topping husband Eddie Fisher decided to throw a party, nobody expected their home to become ground zero for the most notorious Roaring Twenties bash of the decade. The pair, beloved for their wholesome images and relentless work ethic, wanted to celebrate youth, success, and a rare night off. So, they transformed their modest backyard into a jazz-age playground, complete with flapper costumes, live music, and enough Prohibition-era props to fool even the most nostalgic guest. But this wasn't just a costume party. Hollywood's youngest and brightest, Tab Hunter, Leon Tyler, and a swarm of future legends descended on the Fisher home with a hunger for something more than nostalgia. As the night unfolded, the masks slipped. Cigarettes, cocktails, and glances that lingered a beat too long set the tone. The laughter turned to wild shrieks as games got riskier and the boundaries between guests blurred. It didn't take long for whispers to circulate. Photos would later surface showing America's golden couple leading a conga line of tipsy, half-dressed starlets through their garage-turned speakeasy. Reports of flirtations and secret trysts, all hidden behind beaded curtains and smoke, followed in the days after. What had started as a playful nod to the past quickly became a cautionary tale about the dangers of letting your guard down, even among friends. Only those present know the full truth, but the stories leaked anyway. Innocent eyes were nowhere to be found by the end of the night, and everyone in attendance left changed, some with regrets and others with new reputations. The Fisher-Reynolds party became a warning to other Hollywood couples. Sometimes, when you throw open your doors, you can't control what comes in or what escapes. 8. Sophia Loren's Paramount Lot Party, 1957. When Sophia Loren arrived in Hollywood, the city trembled with anticipation, and in 1957, she cemented her status as a new icon by hosting a party on the Paramount lot that would become the stuff of legend, not just for the star power on display, but for the irresistible chaos that simmered beneath the surface. This wasn't a house party in the traditional sense, but it had all the intimacy, glamour, and danger of a private mansion, only with studio lights, endless corridors, and the scent of celluloid in the air. Loren's guest list was the envy of every agent in town. The creme de la creme of Hollywood's bombshells, leading men and kingmakers turned out in their finest. The highlight A now iconic photograph of Sophia giving Jane Mansfield the side-eye as Mansfield's neckline plunged toward scandal. A single snapshot that captured the tension, competition, and raw energy of the evening. But what the cameras missed was even more explosive. As the night wore on, rules slipped away. Cocktails flowed, cigarettes burned down to the filter, and flirtations danced into darkened corners. Some whispered that clandestine affairs were sparked in the shadows. Others claimed that alliances, both professional and personal, were sealed over games of chance in dressing rooms. Old rivalries flared, and new stars were made, not just on screen, but in the hearts and beds of those who mattered. By dawn, the Paramount lot was littered with empty glasses, lost shoes, and secrets that would fuel gossip columns for months. For Lauren, the party was a declaration. She had arrived, and she could command not just a set, but an entire city. For everyone else, it was a night that proved in Hollywood even the wildest fantasies could come true, if only for a single, unforgettable night. 9th, Joan Crawford's Store Club Bash. There are Hollywood nights, and then there are Joan Crawford nights. In 1951, the legendary actress, equal parts elegance and force of nature, hosted a store club party that would echo down Sunset Boulevard for years to come. The Store Club, known for velvet banquettes and a clientele of moguls and icons, was transformed that night into a stage for Crawford's own brand of controlled chaos. Crawford arrived in a gown that sparkled beneath the chandeliers, every step announcing that this was her night. Frank Sinatra crooned, Marilyn Monroe mingled, and Humphrey Bogart raised a glass in salute. But as the hours passed, the party shifted from polite society to decadent abandon. Cigarette smoke curled above the crowd, laughter spilt into the street, and the liquor seemed bottomless. What set Crawford's bash apart wasn't just the guest list, it was the sense of permission she granted. In her presence, boundaries vanished. Glamorous women flirted openly, men traded secrets in dim corners, and the music thundered until it drowned out reason. Photographers, invited for just a moment, captured a few images before being escorted out, leaving behind rumors of what their lenses had missed. In the days that followed, gossip columns buzzed with stories of wild dancing, public displays of affection, and business deals inked on cocktail napkins. Joan herself brushed off the talk, but insiders knew the party had set a new standard for Hollywood's wild nights. In the city of reinvention, Crawford proved that sometimes the wildest parties were thrown by those who'd already seen it all and still wanted more. 1. Hedda Hopper's legendary birthday party. When gossip columnist Hedda Hopper celebrated her birthday, it was more than a party. It was an event that sent shockwaves through Hollywood's social order. Hopper wielded her pen like a scalpel, building and destroying reputations with a single column. For her infamous birthday bash, she invited everyone who mattered, and more than a few who didn't, just to watch the fireworks. It was said the guest list could make or break a career overnight. The decor rivaled a film premiere, with golden balloons, towering floral displays, and tables groaning under the weight of endless champagne. Attendees included legends like Judy Garland and Clark Gable, with lesser-known hopefuls hanging on every word. But this wasn't just a celebration. It was a minefield. The air crackled with ambition and anxiety. Hopper presided at the center, greeting old friends and new rivals, all the while taking mental notes that might appear in print the next morning. But it wasn't just the social maneuvering that made the night legendary. Rumors swirled about what was really in the glasses being poured and how the guest list evolved as the evening wore on. Stories emerged of stars sneaking away to the garden for private conversations, or more. Excessive drinking was the norm, and the after-midnight crowd grew increasingly uninhibited, with laughter rising and secrets spilling as reputations hung in the balance. By dawn, the mansion was littered with confetti and half-empty glasses, while the city buzzed about who'd risen and who'd fallen in Hopper's estimation. For weeks afterward, insiders pored over her columns, looking for clues about what she'd seen and who'd crossed the line. In Hollywood, some parties are forgotten before the last guest leaves. Hedda Hopper's birthday was the exception, an evening where careers were made, alliances were forged, and the legend of Hollywood's wildest gatherings grew ever larger. 2. Pickfair, Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks's mansion. In the earliest days of Hollywood, no address symbolized power and glamour quite like Pickfair, the sprawling estate of Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks. It was the original celebrity mansion, a fairy tale castle that became the center of the film world and the scene of some of the wildest, most influential parties of the 1920s and 30s. Presidents, royalty, and every A-list star of the silent and early sound eras graced its halls, but it was the private soirees, when the cameras stopped rolling, that truly made Pickfair infamous. Pickford, America's sweetheart, and Fairbanks, the king of swashbuckling adventure, created an environment where decorum and elegance mingled with mischief and risk. Early parties leaned toward the stately, with orchestras, fine food, and poetry readings. But as years passed and the industry's young lions grew bolder, Pickfair's gatherings evolved into full-blown bacchanals. Drunken practical jokes were common. One infamous evening saw guests racing bathtubs down the marble halls, while another ended with an impromptu midnight swim, clothes optional. Behind closed doors, Hollywood's power players cut deals, started romances, and sometimes plotted sabotage. Tallulah Bankhead and John Barrymore, famous for their wit and recklessness, turned some later parties into legends of debauchery, flooding entire wings, challenging guests to dares that could end a career, and daring the hosts to keep up. The press never got the whole story, but those who attended whispered about what went on in the guest rooms, the billiard lounge, or the secret gardens. As the industry changed, Pickfair's parties faded in wildness, but their legend endured. To be invited was to know you'd made it. To survive the night was something else entirely. In Hollywood's memory, Pickfair remains the castle where the old order reigned, and sometimes unraveled, one wild party at a time. 10th, Clara Bow's It Girl parties. If you wanted to see Hollywood without its mask, you went to Clara Bow's place. The original It Girl was famous for breaking every rule the studios imposed, and her home became a magnet for anyone who wanted a taste of real freedom in an industry built on illusion. Bow's parties were unlike any others in the city, raucous, inclusive, and completely unpredictable. She invited everyone, from A-list stars to studio grips and extras, and nobody ever felt out of place. Her parties hummed with jazz and laughter, the air thick with the scent of cigarettes and gin. The walls vibrated as guests danced on tables, played outrageous games, and shed both inhibitions and clothing as the hours wore on. Neighbors regularly called the police, complaining about the noise, but Clara only saw it as a sign that the night was getting good. Rumor had it that she kept a stash of disguises for guests who wanted to slip out unseen, or for those brave enough to don them for late-night pranks. Unlike the carefully curated gatherings at other star homes, Bow's bashes celebrated chaos. Anyone could show up and blend in, and the only real rule was to leave your judgment at the door. Even in a city built on secrets, Clara's home felt like a refuge for those who couldn't or wouldn't fit the mold. The wildness, the equality, and the sheer joy of her parties made her a legend, not just on screen, but in the living rooms and backlots of everyone who survived a night in her orbit. In the end, Clara Bow's parties were about more than just excess. They were about acceptance. And for a brief golden window, she let Hollywood's lost souls know they belonged, even if it was only for one night. 11th, Hedda Hopper's legendary birthday party. When gossip columnist Hedda Hopper celebrated her birthday, it was more than a party. It was an event that sent shockwaves through Hollywood's social order. Hopper wielded her pen like a scalpel, building and destroying reputations with a single column. For her infamous birthday bash, she invited everyone who mattered, and more than a few who didn't, just to watch the fireworks. It was said the guest list could make or break a career overnight. The decor rivaled a film premiere, with golden balloons, towering floral displays, and tables groaning under the weight of endless champagne. Attendees included legends like Judy Garland and Clark Gable, with lesser-known hopefuls hanging on every word. But this wasn't just a celebration. It was a minefield. The air crackled with ambition and anxiety. Hopper presided at the center, greeting old friends and new rivals, all the while taking mental notes that might appear in print the next morning. But it wasn't just the social maneuvering that made the night legendary. Rumors swirled about what was really in the glasses being poured, and how the guest list evolved as the evening wore on. stories emerged of stars sneaking away into the garden for private conversations or more. Excessive drinking was the norm, and the after-midnight crowd grew increasingly uninhibited, with laughter rising and secrets spilling as reputations hung in balance. By dawn, the mansion was littered with confetti and half-empty glasses, while the city buzzed about who'd risen and who'd fallen in Hopper's estimation. For weeks afterward, insiders pored over her columns, looking for clues about what she'd seen and who'd crossed a line. In Hollywood, some parties are forgotten before the last guest leaves. Hedda Hopper's birthday was the exception, an evening where careers were made, alliances were forged, and the legend of Hollywood's wildest gatherings grew ever larger. 12th, Pickfair, Mary Pickford, and Douglas Fairbanks's mansion. In the earliest days of Hollywood, no address symbolized power and glamour quite like Pickfair, the sprawling estate of Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks. It was the original celebrity mansion, a fairy tale castle that became the center of the film world and the scene of some of the wildest, most influential parties of the 1920s and 30s. Presidents, royalty, and every A-list star of the silent and early sound eras graced its halls, but it was the private soirees when the cameras stopped rolling that truly made Pickfair infamous. Pickford, America's sweetheart, and Fairbanks, the king of swashbuckling adventure, created an environment where decorum and elegance mingled with mischief and risk. Early parties leaned toward the stately, with orchestras, fine food, and poetry readings. But as years passed and the industry's young lions grew bolder, Pickfair's gatherings evolved into full-blown bacchanals. Drunken practical jokes were common. One infamous evening saw guests racing bathtubs down the marble halls, while another ended with an impromptu midnight swim, clothes optional. Behind closed doors, Hollywood's power players cut deals, started romances, and sometimes plotted sabotage. Tallulah Bankhead and John Barrymore, famous for their wit and recklessness, turned some later parties into legends of debauchery, flooding entire wings, challenging guests to dare that could end a career and daring the hosts to keep up. The press never got the whole story, but those who attended whispered about what went on in the guest rooms, the billiard lounge, or the secret gardens. As the industry changed, Pickfair's parties faded in wildness, but their legend endured. To be invited was to know you'd made it. To survive the night was something else entirely. In Hollywood's memory, Pickfair remains the castle where the old order reigned, and sometimes unraveled, one wild party at a time. 13. Tallulah Bankhead's Beverly Hills gatherings. Tallulah Bankhead wasn't just an actress. She was a force of nature, a walking scandal who brought chaos and laughter wherever she went. Her Beverly Hills house parties were the talk of both the cocktail crowd and the gossip columns, and for good reason. If you received a Bankhead invitation, you braced yourself. Anything could happen, and it usually did. Tallulah's soirees began with sophistication, cocktails served in crystal, witty banter ricocheting across the living room, and a playlist of jazz and blues that set a mood of expectation. But as the night deepened, her famous disregard for rules took over. Guests, an eclectic mix of actors, writers, athletes, and musicians, found themselves pulled into games that started out as innocent charades and ended with strip poker, impromptu midnight swims, or Tallulah herself challenging an entire college wrestling team to a friendly match in the foyer. The liquor flowed, cigarettes burned nonstop, and inhibitions evaporated with every passing hour. Bankhead reveled in making the powerful uncomfortable, teasing moguls, daring leading ladies, and making sure no one left without a story. Her openness about sexuality and her total indifference to Hollywood's unwritten codes made her home a haven for anyone craving freedom, laughter, and a break from the grind of studio life. There was always a sense of unpredictability. Maybe the night would end with poetry readings on the roof, maybe with broken lamps and a neighbor threatening to call the cops. It didn't matter. Tallulah would just laugh, pour another drink, and demand the party keep going. The next day, her house would be scattered with empty bottles, high heels, and half-remembered memories. Guests nursed hangovers and wondered what secrets would make it into the next day's columns. But one thing was certain. If you survived a Tallulah Bankhead party, you'd seen the real Hollywood, raw, untamed, and unforgettable. In Hollywood, some nights were too wild to survive the sunrise, and the stories too shocking to ever hit the screen. Behind every glamorous legend was a house, a party, and a secret that changed someone's fate forever. These wild nights weren't just a backdrop, they were the real heart of old Hollywood. So next time you see those flawless red carpet smiles, remember, the wildest moments happened when the cameras stopped rolling. Who knows what's still locked behind those mansion doors?